All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome once again to my channel. Welcome to another video. Nothing special written up on the board for this one. Should be pretty short, sweet, to the point. All right, so in this video, I'd just like to talk about the paradox of enslavement. As an ideology, the paradox of enslavement is contradictory under the concepts we know of as natural law, right? Equal and opposite reactions and whatnot. So, just kind of wanted to discuss that a little bit for a moment. So, what is the concept of enslavement? It is the use of coercive force in order to drive somebody else's will into alignment with your own, right? Well, under the golden rule, as in the rule of unity, the rule of being without hypocrisy, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Here's where the paradox comes in. If I am trying to force other people to bend to my will, right? That is not treating others as I would want to be treated. Well, one could say, well, what if I wanted to be enslaved? Well, here's the paradox. If you want to be forced against your will to do something, then it's your will and you're not being forced against your will, it's willing servitude, right? If you want to be basically coerced by physical violence and action against your personal safety and your well-being and the security of your belongings and possessions. As soon as you want it to happen, it's no longer coercive and it's no longer against your will, right? So there's a contradiction right there. In the previous video, we talked about hypocrisy and how ultimately being under control of someone else is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy being internal contradiction. The slaver-slave mindset is contradiction internally. It is hypocritical, right? So, I just wanted to discuss that paradox. It's similar to the whole self that doesn't trust itself kind of paradox. Well, if the self doesn't trust itself, then that self doesn't trust the self that doesn't trust itself. And so it kind of just creates this feedback loop in the brain where you start having this kind of just bickering in the back of your head coming from, what you could call a demon or what you could call the devil or something along those lines, where you have this feedback loop of noise where it's just, oh, I don't trust myself. I don't like this. I don't like myself. Right? And I speculate that this is the source of a lot of mental health issues in the United States and really the world in general, but the United States right now being the center stage for mental illness, depravity, and many other things going on. I'd speculate that that has to do with it. Although speculations are just speculations, Point being is if you sit there in a mindset of I want to force other people to bend to my will, you're not following the golden rule and you're being a hypocrite. If you are letting other people, quote, force you into doing their will, right? You're being a hypocrite. Or even if you embrace the mindset that you're being forced into doing somebody else's will, right? You're kind of being a hypocrite. Because you could always choose to do something different. You could choose to fight back, you could choose to walk away, or you could just choose to fucking drop it and go along with their plan willingly. And then avoiding hypocrisy. But it's kind of like that whole, it's the concept of the arrow being released from the archer's grip and it flies and misses the target. Where did the sin begin? It didn't begin when the arrow was released from the archer's grip, right? It started to sin as soon as the mind of the archer failed to take into account certain variables such as wind, droppage, or some other factor, right? But the paradox of enslavement, the paradox of hypocrisy, is something that people ought to recognize and have up front and foremost in their conscious mind, and recognizing it everywhere they go. Because a lot of people like to blame other people for the consequences of their own actions. They like to blame people for why they feel a certain way. They say, you make me feel this way, or you made me do this and react in this way, when that is the paradigm of enslavement. That is you saying, my actions are not my responsibility, and it is trying to shift the personal responsibility and accountability for one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions onto other people, so that way one can avoid blame. And ultimately, it's part of what's bringing the entire society down. Of course, society being a reflection of the individual first and foremost, it's bringing you down. And then from there on, it's bringing society down with you, whether or not it's because you, and I'm not saying anyone particular, but whether or not it's you consciously doing it because you don't want society, or you don't want to see society succeed, or whether you're just subconsciously doing it because you don't want to accept the personal responsibility and accountability for your own actions. Either way, the consequences are still the same. And so it's important to recognize one's own personal responsibility and accountability when it comes to their daily living, and be conscious of what their thoughts are, how their emotions are going, what actions they're taking. Are they living in alignment with their conscience? These are important things to be conscious of in your daily living. Otherwise, we can all sit there and play the blame game, but it doesn't get you anywhere, doesn't get me anywhere. Even if the other person had a part to play, it doesn't get them anywhere except for further away from the truth, right? Or at least reconciliation of the paradox of a broken friendship, But there's a lot of factors that kind of have to be considered in daily living, and the paradox of enslavement, whether it's actual, chain and ball slavery, chattel slavery, debt slavery, whether it's, trying to blame somebody else for your thought patterns or your actions or your emotions. Either way, that paradox is something that needs to be reconciled, because otherwise it's like a black hole in the mind, and it just starts warping the thinking process. And that's the thing, it's nobody's fault but the own individual. Even if society plays a part in it, even if one's own friends and family play a part in that drama that led up to that, ultimately one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions are their own personal responsibility. Something Mark Passio talks about, it's something Dylan Sicosio touches on in his books, and it's something that many other people talk about. It's basically the core aspect of the AA program, is taking personal responsibility for one's own life. And by doing that, you ultimately fulfill the 10 Commandments, you fulfill the commandments and teachings of Jesus, and you live without hypocrisy, and the world can get back to living in a state of freedom, but it starts with the individual. So, as Chester Bennington says from that song in Linkin Park, it starts with one. And as Gojira says in their song Silvera, when you change yourself, you change the world. And that's what I got for this video. Thanks.